Hello there and welcome to another Itsy Bitsy Book Bits chapter reading. Today I will be reading from The Perfect Outcast by Melissa O. Hansen. Chapter 1. Alina took her seat in biology class and clicked on her panel, hiding behind the screen. When she looked in the mirror that morning, she had despaired to see the trail of bumps on her face had erupted into flaming red peaks. She begged Jade to let her stay home, but it was no use. Her absence would only get her in trouble. For almost an hour, Alina worked with her makeup to conceal the blemishes. But despite Jade's assurances no one would notice, Alina felt them protruding like mountains, so enormous she could see them from the corner of her eyes. Over the past 3 years, the other girls in Priya matured in ways that Alina did not. Their bodies slimmed and lengthened, their figures blossomed, and cheekbones sharpened under thick eyelashes. They were each beautiful but unique, and flaunted every feature that stood out. Now, at 17, Alina stood out in ways she didn't like. Instead of growing slender, her skin puckered around her waist and thighs. Her caramel-coloured hair looked limp and wiry, even after she brushed it, and her teeth were crooked compared to the clean smiles around her. In the rare event she did smile, she kept her lips closed. 3 girls entered the classroom, and as Alina glanced up, she met eyes with Flora, who gave her a haughty sneer. Gwen and Zelma batted their eyelashes at 2 passing boys, and after flirting outrageously for a minute, huddled near Alina to complain about them. I can't wait to be done with young boys, Gwen sighed. She opened a compact mirror and held it close to her face, puckering her lips. I am done with them, Flora replied. You won't believe who came to see me last night. She paused, waiting for their response. Who? Both girls said at once, a hint of jealousy in their voices. Flora leaned in. Rufus. Do you know him? He's so hot, and he's like 200 years old. Pearl was ticked off when he came. I think she was jealous. You should have seen her trying to flirt with him when he came to see me. Can you believe it? My caretaker trying to steal a guy from me. Well, he totally ignored her. We were alone in the front room, and he told me. Flora dropped her voice, but Alina heard every word and cringed behind her panel. She understood why Jade never dated. The way older men flirted with young girls made her shudder, despite Flora's exaggerations. Miss Rhonda stood up and addressed the class, and Alina shut off her panel, knowing it would draw attention from her teacher. Miss Rhonda's glossy curls bounced as she shimmied between the desks in tight jeans and stiletto heels. She seemed proud of her large teeth because she smiled at every turn, except when her eye fell on Alina. She visibly twitched. Alina was used to this reaction. In all her years of school, only one teacher, Miss Vivian, had positively acknowledged her. Miss Vivian praised Alina in front of the class and didn't scold her when she daydreamed. She was almost like a friend. Once, after a boy called Alina ugly, Miss Vivian slipped her a note telling her she understood what it felt like to be different. Alina found that strange since Miss Vivian was beautiful like everyone else, but the words comforted her anyway. She still had the note in the jewellery box on her dresser. But now Miss Vivian was gone. Tears sprang back to Alina's eyes and she blinked them back. She hadn't cried over her former teacher in years. Alina, will you please join in the class? Miss Rhonda barked. Everyone's on page 10 except for you. Alina reddened as she switched her panel and found the biology tab, then swiped to page 10. Miss Rhonda glared for another moment, then turned back to the class. Today we'll discuss the process of creating life in the Gordian laboratories. Take a look at the magnificent illustration before you, she raved. Page 10 displayed a diagram of a child's growth from a small drop of ageless serum to a perfect preemie baby. Now, as you remember from our lesson last week on reproduction, Miss Rhonda began, while a few snickers broke out across the class, the mortal world of Cartham is a place where babies grow inside women for 9 months. The baby develops, and this is very unpleasant. What's so funny? Miss Rhonda glared with a hand on her hip. A boy with tears of laughter in his eyes raised his hand. We can't see how a baby could grow inside somebody. Wouldn't the woman get really big? Of course, snapped Miss Rhonda. Why do you think pregnancy was so uncomfortable? Not that any of you understand what that means. No one in Priya has ever been uncomfortable. So try to imagine. But pregnancy wasn't the worst part. Think of a baby being forced out of the woman's body. The The pain was excruciating and many women and babies died in the process. Alina looked round the room. The students looked both fascinated and disgusted. Babies died? Selma asked, puzzled. Did they keep growing, into dead adults? Miss Rhonda shook her head. No, death means they no longer exist. But what happens to the bodies? Miss Rhonda seemed surprised at the question, as if she'd never thought of it before. Well, she broke off, frowning. The dead bodies are... She stood still for a moment, eyebrows knitted, then flashed a smile. Moving right along. She dodged, ignoring the confused faces. Father Sampson, as we know, wanted his world to be free of pain, and this he achieved. Immortality made conception between men and women impossible, but also unnecessary, as he forms life with his ageless serum. As a result, we enjoy the pleasures of intimacy without the inconvenience of pregnancy and childbirth. The class burst into giggles again. Miss Rhonda rolled her eyes and went on. Now, Father Sampson is aware endless life can get dull without variety, so he enjoys being creative with the lives he forms. Selma snorted and whispered, especially his women, he moulds them 20 years in advance. The girls around them stifled their laughter. Miss Rhonda's eyes snapped to Selma. What did you say? A long frigid pause followed, and Alina held her breath. Selma dropped her eyes. Miss Rhonda flounced over to Selma and hovered above her. Did you say something disrespectful about Father Sampson? Miss Rhonda's lips turned white, her willowy figure taut and forbidding. The cold silence lingered. No, Selma panted, her voice barely audible. Miss Rhonda circled the desk, her face hard as stone. Perhaps you'd like to stand and repeat your little joke so the proper punishment can be administered. Selma flushed and shook her head. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to, forgive me. Miss Rhonda's bangles tinkled as she rested her hands on Selma's desk. Mocking Father Sampson is unforgivable, she hissed. Say something like that again and I'll make certain he hears of it. Maybe that will teach you to watch your words. Selma nodded, her pretty cheeks a bright shade of pink. Miss Rhonda glowered a moment longer, then turned to the class and continued as if no interruption had occurred. Look around our room, for example, she said, waving her hand over the class. You'll notice none of us is alike. Skin, hair and eye colour differ. We have tall and short, black and white, blonde and brown. Father Sampson is creative with hair colour, so occasionally you'll see a redhead. However, he doesn't use the same creativity in people as he does in animals. He likes his people to resemble the humans of Cartham, but perfected and beautified. Flora's hand shot up in the air. She spoke before Miss Rhonda could call on her. Why doesn't Father Sampson experiment more with people? I have lots of friends who want a different hair colour, like blue or pink. I've heard caretakers can give requests for their wards. What if I requested one with purple hair? The class giggled, but Flora didn't flinch, showing absolute sincerity. Alina's face grew warm. She didn't know caretakers could request how their wards looked. First of all, Miss Rhonda stressed, it's unlikely any of you will raise a child. There are thousands of applicants each year, and only a handful are approved. But as a matter of fact, Father Sampson has experimented with people, and that's why he now chooses not to. This happens to be what our lesson is on today. Swipe to page 16. Panels clicked throughout the room, and Alina grabbed hers with wet palms. She didn't like the direction of this lesson. Around the time each of you were being formed, Miss Rhonda explained, Father Sampson was under enormous pressure to produce more variety in babies, so he decided to experiment. Unfortunately, his first batch went drastically wrong. He repaired the damage as best he could, but only one case was severely affected. Miss Rhonda glanced at Alina before continuing. He was unable to alter the serum cells without disfiguring the child, who continues to grow abnormally to this day. He learned a hard lesson and now wishes the case to be known, a reminder of what can go wrong when we desire too much. Miss Rhonda